I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the bathroom and smiled. I looked good. At 45, I had a slender figure with curves in the right places. Large, still-pert breasts were my defining feature. My hips were wider than they were in my 20s, but I had a flat stomach. My butt is not saggy, I owe that to my personal trainer who made me work on it. I was wearing my sexiest bra and panties, lovely black lace with sheer nylon set that was more for my partner than a robe. I was wondering, what does Simon prefer? I pushed that thought aside as I put on the red dress my husband loves so much. It was short, but still tasteful. It showed just enough cleavage to seduce and attract attention without being slutty. It was super sexy for my husband. I sat down at the dressing table and straightened my hair. In anticipation of my big night, I got my hair done. Expensive, but worth every penny. I put on light makeup. I knew Simon liked this look better as he mentioned it as one of my best features. We had lunch several times a week, and at some point our conversations turned to personal matters. Simon was dashing. I know that's an old-fashioned description, but it fits him perfectly. He was my age, impeccably dressed, and carried himself with a class last seen in actors from those old movies my husband loved so much. I didn't mention that he's handsome. Simon has a square jaw, a proud Roman nose, and the most amazing blue eyes I've ever seen. His body was sculpted from his dedication to training, which marked the beginning of our transition from simple collaboration to something more personal. One day he commented on my fitness and asked where I trained. It was a breakthrough from talking about work to personal conversations. He began to flatter me, and I assumed that this was how all workplace romances began. Simple pleasantries, a compliment on my dress, a mention of my change in hairstyle, an innocent touch, the beginning of the downfall of a previously happily married woman. This evening we had to intensify our casual relationship. Simon suggested we go out for dinner and have martinis. It took me 2 days to agree. It wasn't that I was unhappy with my husband. I think we were just comfortable with each other. Simon was like a new drug, another high that thrilled my senses and made me addicted. After my makeup was carefully applied, I smiled to myself. I knew that he would love me like this. I planned to knock him down and I wouldn't fail. I have to be perfect. My thoughts were distracted by the opening of the garage. Joe was on time, as usual. He was a creature of habit. I calculated everything. I knew exactly when he would walk through the kitchen and notice that dinner wasn't ready. He looked around the first floor looking for me and found nothing. I wanted him to find me dressed for an evening walk around the city. That was a big part of my plans for the evening. The reveal. When Simon suggested we go on a date, I knew what it meant. We were not children. He expected everything from me. I was going to give it to him. He made reservations at my favorite restaurant. He made reservations at my favorite jazz club for a martini. And the finishing touch was the room he booked at the Hyatt. He couldn't invite me to his house. He was also married and his wife would have been just as upset as my husband. I knew Joe would get over it eventually. Our love was completely safe, but I couldn't hide it from him. I knew I had to tell him what I was going to do that evening. My best friend Carla told me it was the dumbest thing I'd ever planned to do. She seemed to think that Joe wouldn't forgive me, although she didn't know him as well as I did. Until that moment, I had lived with him for 23 years and knew him like the back of my hand. Joe called me and I checked one last time. I have to be ready when he comes into the room. It was important to me that he saw me dressed impeccably. Cool and sexy. I stepped on my heels and went to look for a suitable handbag. When he entered the room, I took a deep breath and stepped away from the closet to make my big statement. "Hey, baby," he said with a big smile. "Why are you so dressed up?" "Joe, I need you to sit down. I have something to tell you, and it may be difficult for you to hear." He looked at me as if I had two heads but sat down in a chair by our window. "Joe, this is how I'm dressed for today's date. I want to give my man the best from head to toe, mind, body, and soul." He looked sad. I hoped I didn't break it too much. "Darling, I had lunch several times a week with a man from work named Simon. A tear rolled down his cheek. I had to gather my courage to continue the story. No, we didn't have an affair. I never held his hand, never hugged him, never kissed him. Joe? His head was in his hands. He ran his hands through his hair and looked at me like a beaten man. He didn't say anything. Joe, he invited me to have dinner with him tonight, and I'm being completely upfront and honest with you. He's booked a hotel room. I'm sorry to say it took me 2 days to agree. I felt like it wouldn't be cheating if I told you. He looked out the window and asked, "Sorry it took so long, or sorry you agreed?" "Oh, and it won't be cheating unless I agree." I sighed. "Joe, I've loved you most of my adult life, only you. I felt like I deserved it. A short break from us. Does it make sense?" "No, not in the slightest," he answered quickly. I nodded. "That's why I'm dressed like that. I told you this is for my man. You're my man, Joe. You will always be him." "I don't understand. You said this idiot booked the room and you agreed." "It's right. I agreed, but cancelled the meeting at noon today." "Why?" "I was sitting at my desk and got excited, really turned on, but it wasn't because of Simon. I was looking at a photo of us on the beach in Cancun. You were shirtless and wearing your swim trunks. God, you look so good in this photo." At that moment, I realized that I didn't need Simon. "I already have you." He turned away from me. I walked up to him and hugged him from behind. "Joe, I know I have to confess what I was going to do. I was such a fool and I'm so sorry. I was hoping that you could forgive my momentary stupidity and invite me somewhere tonight." I took Simon's words as if they were for you and me and not for him. First of all, I felt him take a deep breath. "Joe, my love. What about Simon, the asshole?" I smiled and turned to face him. I called his wife and told her everything. Simon has a bigger problem than me canceling my appointment with him. You agreed anyway. I know, and I have to live with this mistake, but please show me mercy. I admitted. He snorted. You only did it to ease your conscience. I fell to my knees. Please forgive me. I was a fool. He lifted my chin and said, I will forgive you, but you betrayed my trust. I will never forget this. I know. I will never give you a reason to doubt me again. After this confession, I pleased him in all the positions in which he desired me. I obeyed orders and did everything he came up with in his perverted head. We had such hard sex as if he was punishing me for shaking my trust. At some point I moaned, as did he, and we came to the finish line. He pulled me away from him and frowned at me. This won't fix us. I knew. It didn't go away with our sex or our date. A year later, the emotional pain was still very much alive. He was not quite the same as before, and I felt it. The sex was a little rougher, my phone wasn't always where I left it, and once or twice I thought he was following me. Breaking someone's trust is the worst thing you can do. It's like fixing a broken plate. It's fixed, but it will never be as strong as before. I have to live with this, and it's hard. Some will say that I shouldn't have told him because why hurt him? Others will say that he should have divorced me because I am cheating just waiting to happen. It's hard to argue with this, but I know myself. I know I won't fall. I may have been close to it, but I came out of it and put the lid on it. I'll never go that crazy again. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one, about listening to the next one.